So when the snow's falling down and it's super freaking cold outside and windy and everything, I always think about a story and I like to read it on nights like this. The Little Match Girl by Hans Christian Andersen. How cold it was. It had been snowing all day and was still snowing as a little girl made her way along the dark, narrow street. Already her hands and bare feet were blue with cold. It's true she had been wearing slippers when she left home, but they were her mother's slippers and were much too big for her. She had lost one as she ran across the road between two carriages, and the other had just dropped off and had been snatched by a boy as ragged as herself. The girl clutched a bundle of matches in her small, thin hands, and the cruel wind tore at her patched skirt and stung her pale cheeks. Hour after hour, she tramped the snow-covered streets, hoping that some kind passerby would take her matches. But it was the last day of the old year, and those who found themselves in the street were in too much of a hurry to get home to their big dinners and warm fires to think about buying matches. I dare not return, the little girl thought miserably. What would my father say if I had to tell him I had not sold a single bundle? In her mind's eye, she could see the poverty-stricken attic she had to call home, with cracks in the wall stuffed with straw and rags to keep out the biting wind. No, far better to stay outside, even when all the lights of the shops go out and the streets are empty of people, she decided. At the end of a row of shops, two gray-stoned houses stood close together. It was here between the houses that the match girl found a place to sit. How she shivered as she crouched low, trying to protect herself from the falling snow. If only she dared to light one of the matches and warm her frozen fingers. At last, she took out a match and struck it against the wall. And oh, how brightly it glowed in the darkness. The warm, pure flame was like a little candle when she covered it with her hand. For a moment, it seemed to the match girl that she was seated in front of a roaring fire in a beautiful room filled with ornaments. The fire was so cheerful and inviting, she stretched out her feet to warm them as well as her hands. Alas, the match burned itself out, and the vision vanished. When the little girl struck her second match, the light fell on the wall, and there, instead of a cold gray wall, was a room in the center of which stood a table covered with a white tablecloth and dainty china. A fat roast goose, stuffed with prunes and apples, sat on a silver serving dish, and oh, how good it smelled. There was so much food on the table that the little girl scarcely knew where to begin. Then all of a sudden, the goose rolled off the dish and almost fell at her feet. But as she stretched out her hand, the match burned itself out, and there was nothing to touch but a solid gray wall. Presently, the match girl struck a third match against the wall. Immediately, she found herself under a magnificent Christmas tree. It was taller and even more beautiful than the one she had seen last year in the shop window. Hundreds of candles twinkled on the green branches, and the spirit of Christmas itself seemed to shine out from the tree. Smiling in delight, the child reached towards the candles, but they suddenly began to rise. As the match went out, the Christmas tree disappeared, and the little girl saw that the Christmas candles, which were now high above her head, were really stars. One of the stars fell, leaving a bright trail across the heavens, and the little girl remembered how once her grandmother, the only person who truly loved her, had talked about heaven before she died. How wonderful it would be to see my grandmother again, she thought as she struck her fourth match. The match blazed into life, and there, caught in its dazzling flame, was her beloved grandmother, as sweet and radiant as she had once been in real life. "Don't leave me, grandmother," whispered the little girl. "I know that you will as soon as this match burns out. Please don't leave me. Stay with me. Stay with me." And she began to light one match after another in a frantic haste. The matches gave off a light so dazzling that it was as if the sun were shining. Never had her grandmother looked so beautiful. Then the little girl struck her very last match, and her grandmother opened her arms and clasped the child to herself. The match sputtered and died, dropping from the cold, lifeless hands of the match girl. She was found in the morning, the first day of the new year. "Poor child," said one of the women in a small crowd that had gathered. She must have frozen to death. Yet she looks happy, whispered her friend. She looks as if she had seen something wonderful before she died. Good night.